Are you ready to feed your inner tiger? I hope so, because in this episode of MN Live, we're going to be talking tigers real deep. We're going to be getting into the tiger principles. Well, we're going to be leading into the tiger principles, where you will be able to know the deepest energies within you and how you can align that potential with what you do so you can thrive. And I'm Stephen Rudolph, and this is Multiple Natures Live, where in every episode you come along with me, and the two of us together are going to find out where that potential lies in you and how you can bring it out and align it with what you do everywhere, whether that's your work, whether that's your home, whether that's in the communities that you might work in or spiritual communities that you might be a part of. You're going to find ways to connect your inner self everywhere you go. We're going to be leaning into it. I'm leaning as far into it as I can right now. And this is really the heart of the multiple natures. Not just theory, but it's a philosophy. And that's what endears me to multiple natures so much. And in that it's not just like some left hemisphere psychological, psychometric kind of model where you do some test and then my ear thing's popping out here. Where you do some psychometric test. It's like your fly's open, it's like your ear thing is popping out. Like you do some you do some psychometric test and you get some kind of report. You look at it, you go, oh yeah, that looks like me. And you promptly fold it up and stick it in some drawer, like underneath, some old receipts and invoices from 2 years ago, and you never look at it again. So this is not that. Multiple natures is a living thing. It's a living theory, a living philosophy, and you know what? That's what people tell me that they like about it so much. Recently, I was talking with my partner, Ritas, and we were trying to figure out what problem multiple natures solves for our practitioners, the people who use it, because we know it's good and we know it works. And I called them up one by one, and I a bunch of them, not everyone, because we've got like over 150, but I called up a handful of practitioners and I asked them, why are you using the multiple natures? What's it helping you solve? And every one of them was a little bit puzzled, but they all said the same thing ultimately, which was, it's more than just like finding out your natures. It's something that I can connect to at a human level. And it's got a deeper philosophy, and it brings me closer to myself. So there was something very holistic, something very palpable about the way that they felt multiple natures fits into their world. And that's how I see it. That's how it's really something that is not just one of those psychometric tests that you do on Thursday or Friday afternoon for 40 minutes or so, and you just get some results and toss it away. It's something that you can use every day, and it grows, and the more you get into it, the cooler it gets. I've been working with multiple natures now for 14 years, and I have to say that it keeps getting better and deeper. And now that I've discovered ChatGPT technology and AI, it's like, oh my goodness, we've just connected the two together and it's going to a completely different level. I'm going to talk about that later. But let's get into this philosophy that's so rich and that comes to a very simple and basic point about some fundamentals about the tiger. So I'm going to talk about these fundamentals today, and these are what I might call tiger basics. And let me see if I can push the right button to make it come up on the screen here. Oh, and there it is. Okay, all right, that's on number 2. We should be on number 1. Let me see if I can get back to number 1 here. All right, even there we go. Okay, now it looks like we're set. So here we are. These are the tiger basics that we're going to start with. Now, I got 15 of them. It might sound like a lot, but we're going to get through them, and they're really pretty easy. But these are the fundamentals that you need to know if you want to understand the multiple natures philosophy and the seven tiger principles. So we're going to get to those principles. It won't be in this episode. It's going to be in part 2. But I'm laying the groundwork in this episode, so you're going to be able to receive those principles. Now, I hope you don't think this is a bait and switch I'm pulling on you, because the title does say the 7 principles. But before you're ready to get the 7 principles, you gotta, do the groundwork before you get there. I mean, come on, you saw Karate Kid, right? Daniel went to Mr. Miyagi and he wants to learn karate, right? And Mr. Miyagi says, yeah, come on. And then, the first day, he gives him wax on and wax off. Well, that really ticked him off, didn't it? But, he sure learned those blocks. So, this is a little wax on, wax off. But it's really good stuff. So here we go. We're going to go through the fundamentals, the tiger basics, and it goes something like this. It doesn't go with a cough, but it goes like this. Number 1 is the first one, that you have a nature. Yeah, there it is. I'm pushing all the wrong buttons today. You have a nature, and your nature consists of some qualities. So when I say that you have a nature, what I mean by this is you have a personality that is identifiable and that is recognizable. When you meet somebody, they say, oh, I know, or when you meet somebody, you say, I know what they're like. This is what their nature is like. And that's a consistent thing over time, a nature, something that you can see in somebody when they're young. And if you don't see them for a long time, you recognize that, yeah, it's the same person. They're the same kind of person, that personalities. They might change in some ways, right? Some things physically, of course, are going to change. And maybe they, you never knew that they went into programming, or that they became an event planner or something like that. And now they've got all this specific knowledge about them. But when you strip all of that away, you find that it's the same person. There are certain qualities about them, whether they're funny, or whether they're very talkative, or they're very witty, or they're shy, or they're prone to taking risks, or those qualities really won't change in them. And so when I talk about a nature, that's what I mean. So when I say that somebody has a nature, this is the first fundamental, that everybody has a nature. And this comes out of Indian philosophy. If you've ever read the Bhagavad Gita or any of the classics, you'll find out about this idea of something which is called Prakriti. I'm going to reach for a lozenge because I got a little cough coming on. So you got this thing called Prakriti. So Prakriti is, or Swabhav is another word. That's your basic nature. That's like who you are. And I saw this in the philosophy, and I was like, okay, what is that nature? Because they're talking about it all the time in these thousands-year-old books, so it must be important, and it must really be a thing, because if it wasn't a thing, then, it's not going to last thousands of years. So what is that nature? And what I was able to cull, or to figure out from my 21 years of living in India and my research and interacting with all sorts of Sanskrit scholars and traditional scholars and Vedic scholars, was these qualities I determined are made up of 19 basic traits. And this is one way to look at it. You could probably make an argument of, there are different models out there, that there are 5 traits, the Big 5 model, or you could look at the MBTI model and say there are, 4 basic pairs of qualities you can. So there are different models out there that try to understand what makes up or what constitutes the nature. So these are the ones that speak to me. And it's really nobody's really right or wrong. It's a lot has to do with how you feel about it, whether it makes sense to you. I mean, it's the same way with religions, right? Same way with political parties. You can't say one is right or one is wrong. You can say that, well, you're more affiliated with one and that seems more right to you. And the other person is going to say, well, I'm affiliated with this one and this seems right to me. And I think the same is really true with psychometric or psychological models. And this one really speaks to me. And if it speaks to you, you'll hang on, you'll keep listening, and we'll keep going further together. And if it's not, there's another live channel 2 clicks over, probably with somebody who's got another psychological model that might fit, that might suit you, it might fit you, and it might suit you. So, yeah, this is one of those ones where I'm going to say, you don't have to click or subscribe here. You can go click or subscribe over there. But if you like this, yeah, man, click and subscribe here, and let's keep on moving. Okay. So, your nature is made up of 19 key traits. And these traits that I look at are 10 multiple intelligences and 9 multiple natures. And the multiple intelligences I have derived, or I have adapted is a better word, from Howard Gardner's model. So Gardner is a professor of cognitive psychology at Harvard, and that's me pushing the wrong buttons. I think I gotta have to wear my glasses and get this straight for next time. All right, what I wanted to push was this one. Yeah. So these two. These are the multiple intelligences, So the multiple intelligences are abilities. So bodily intelligence, fine bodily intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, logical, linguistic, the visuals, musical, intrapersonal, and naturalistic. Now, I'm not going to go into extensive detail about this today because it would probably take too much time to get into all of them. And so these will be there in the show notes. So if you want to know about them in detail, you can. But those are the basic qualities that talk about your body, about your fingers, your dexterity, about your ability with people, and so on and so forth. So this is one set of qualities that is a component of your nature. And the other set of qualities, let's see that I got this one right next time. There we go. Are natures, and this is the set of qualities that I developed through my study in India that came out of the philosophy from there. And those are protective, educative, administrative, creative, healing, entertaining, providing, entrepreneurial, and adventurous. So you've got all of these qualities within you, right? They make up an entire matrix here if you look at them. There's intelligences on one side, there are natures on the other side, and I like to connect them with each other. So if somebody's highly entertaining, you can look at that one on the right in the middle, entertaining nature, and their bodily intelligence is really extraordinary. So they will entertain you with their body. So if you see anybody who loves to do acting, or they might be inclined to do something with gymnastics, or they want to show off with their body, dancing is also another way that they can do that. So what inclines them to do those kind of things? Well, you say, like, they have a talent. That's in their nature, right? We use those words. But, like, what does it mean specifically? What we're doing is we're breaking it down. It's kind of like if, you see you see some food or something, you're like, hey, how did that get here? What's it made out of? And then you're like, oh yeah, kind of, it's made of, it's like some bread. It's made of flour, and it's made of water, and some salt in it, and it's got some baking soda in it. And so we break down the parts, and then we understand, like, what's the ratio of them, and why does this bread come out like more dense, and why does that one come out like more puffier or fluffier? So in the same way, you look at something like, yeah, this is like brioche kind of bread, or this is a baguette. And so they're different in their texture, in how they come out and how they look, because the ratio of those qualities is different, right? And so the same thing is there for people. Well, we're made up of ingredients at the base level. I mean, of course, we have, like, cells, and, then there's, like, molecules and elements and atoms and so on and so forth. But we're talking at the level of the psychological, or the psychophysical realm. What makes me behave? There are also, I guess you could say, elements there, or basic elements. So how do you define those elements? So I've defined them, or I've looked at them as intelligences and natures. It makes sense for me to do it that way because I can understand the ratios, I see how they fit together, and then I know what comes out of that. I can predict what is going to happen. I can have expectations, and my expectations will be met, right? So it's the same thing. If you know something about cooking, you know what flour is and how it behaves, what water is and how it behaves, and what salt is and how it behaves, and right. If you put them together in a certain ratio and you put them in the oven at a certain then you're going to get the result that comes out, what you're expecting, right? And so the same thing goes with this is why it's important to know these basic elements about how they are. Okay, so what we're talking about is that your nature is made up of these key traits. Your nature is made up of these key traits. Okay, now we get to the tigers. So I'm making good on my promise. We're talking about tigers. So what I'm saying is that your MIs and your MNs are like tigers. And what does that mean? So in the wild, we know that tigers are carnivorous animals and feline species, and we also know, and they exist in India. I've seen them there. I went on tiger safari in Ranthambore, and we know that they have a voracious appetite. So in this case, these MIs and MNs, well, they eat. These tigers eat, but they don't eat little furry creatures and furry animals. What they eat are activities. So in other words, if I talk about a musical intelligence or a musical tiger, so to speak, right? This is a quality inside you that has this drive. It wants to do something musical, right? It wants to eat music. And if you've got a big musical tiger, you know what I'm talking about. Like you're walking down the street and you pass by a music store, you can't stop yourself from going in there and just going looking around and touching the guitars and maybe, I don't know, playing on some drum set that might be there or going over in the keyboard section. You can't stop yourself. Or if you're walking down, you're in the subway someplace or out on the street and there's some musician who's playing in the park, you're going to have to stop and listen to them. And other people are going to be walking by, but you have to, and you also see this very much with little kids. You might have seen these videos on YouTube, right? Everybody's sort of walking around, this kid's just going, he's so fascinated with, right? So that tiger has to eat, and it wants to either play music, and there are plenty of other ones, right? So if you have a healing tiger, that's the one that wants to help people out of pain. So, you go up to people, hey, you don't look like yourself today, right? You want to dig into somebody's business to find out, hey, have you tried this? Or what's the problem with it? And they'll dig and they'll sort of ask, and then they'll offer some sort of help, and they feel really happy once they've helped you. So that tiger has to eat. If you have an educative tiger, that's like mine, a big one. Well, you have all of them, but I mean, if you've got a big one, that one's going to want to eat teaching, explaining. That's what's going on right here, right now, right? You can see me. I'm explaining this stuff, and there's this educative tiger inside me that is just chomping away right now. It knows what to do. It knows what to say. It knows how to keep a focus. It knows which examples to give. They just keep coming left and right. I don't have to think about it. It knows what it's doing. It's eating, right? It's munching. It's chomping. And it's just going at it. If you've got a big adventurous nature, it's got to do something crazy, something risky, something fast, something, buy some Bitcoin or something like that, right? It's got to do something edgy. And when you do that, you get that feeling of satisfaction. So each of those intelligences and natures that I pointed out at the beginning, those are all like tigers, and they all need to eat. And what they eat are activities. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's look at more of these. So tigers eat activities. Tigers can be of different sizes. This is the next point. Tigers can be of different sizes. So what does it mean? You can have big tigers, you can have medium tigers, small tigers. Actually, when we measure them, we measure them in either 5 or even we can make 7 different levels out of the size of tigers. I'll make it easy just for today. We could just say big, medium, and small. But when we do it critically and precisely at multiple natures, we do it on a scale of 1 to 10. We can say it's like a tiger, size 1, size 2, size 3, size 4. We do half measures, 6.5, 7.5. We have a way of measuring how big the tiger is. And what that means is that, right, let's pick another one, a visual tiger. So let's talk about the graphic visual. That's a tiger that loves for drawing, coloring, painting, not the creative side, but that has the capacity to imagine images in the head and to manipulate them and represent them. And I say not creative because sometimes you'll see some people who can, you see these people all the time at like tourist places, and they'll draw the same bridge like 500 times. You know, they can do it again and again. And there's nothing creative about it, but they can just do it like masterfully. They've got that ability to put it down. There are other people who are highly creative and they're visual. I'm not talking about the creative part. I'm just talking about that visual part. Right. There's some people who've got this incredible sense of detail, and that's what we call visual intelligence. And there's a visual tiger, so they need to do something visual constantly. They might be needing to doodle or to draw or to take photographs, or their attention goes toward visual types of activities, and that needs to eat. Right. So if they're doing they're sending a message on texting. They need to go into the emojis, and they're really going to need to like pick out emojis that represent them visually. If you see this, like you'll find that people who are highly visual, usually they'll have like 6 emojis, right, that go along with their afterwards, and they're all kind of a little meaningful and stuff like that. And you're like, man, how long did it take them to go in there and to find that like sushi emoji or whatever that's one that's not in their favorites, some really obscure, like a die or dice or something like that. How did they get that there? So they do that because that tiger needs to eat that. To you, it might seem like a waste of time, or it might seem like, there would be no pleasure in that. Like, why would they do that? Well, they do that because that tiger eats. And so big tigers need to eat a lot, right? They're different sizes. We're going to get to that in a second. So they're big tigers. They're medium tigers. They also need to be engaged, but not nearly as much. We'll talk about that. And then there are smaller ones. This has everything to do with your potential. What I mean by this is that the size of your tiger develops before adulthood, to a large degree up to age 7, and during which period myelination is happening in the brain. So from age like 0 to 7, the brain is wiring itself at a very fast pace. And yes, your genetics, your DNA have a lot of impact on how you develop and which particular traits develop. So it is part nature and part nurture. So the environment that you're in plus your genetics together will determine the degree to which each of these tigers is going to grow. So in other words, like if you're, let's take linguistic intelligence, right? So if you're wired for language, and we see this with people, and we see this with kids. There's some kids who just like really, they rock it and take off with language, and they just start learning really quickly. And there's others who take much longer in order to be able to get there. And it's partially because they're genetics, and maybe because a parent, or both parents, or other family member taught them and read to them a lot and praised them when they were young, and so it started to grow and started to evolve. And so that the size of the tiger depends largely on what happens in those first 7 years. So sometimes you get like, a lot of big tigers that come out. Sometimes it's only a couple of them. And sometimes like you have all like a mixture of them, some big, some medium, some small. They're all different types of sizes, or I can say distributions of sizes of tigers that depend on that. So again, it's up to age 7 that this wiring is happening. It shuts off myelination for a period and turns back on during adolescence again for a short period of time. And then again, it shuts off. So what that means is that, especially up until adolescence, that's the period where development can happen. The most potential can come out. And then at that point, once adolescence is finished, the amount of change that happens is really not very much. It's not that you can't develop skills or you can't learn new things, nothing like that. But the rate at which you can, we say like kids are like sponges, they like pick it up, We don't say like adults' minds are like sponges. It's not really the case. And so this is why they're of different sizes. But anyway, it's just important that we recognize that tigers are of different sizes, and that's okay. You're going to have some big tigers, some medium tigers, and some small tigers. Here's the next one. A tiger's appetite depends on its size, and the amount it eats. All right, so that's pretty obvious. If I've got like a big providing tiger, providing one is the tiger that loves to help and to assist and to do things for other people. It gets pleasure out of being in service. Some people have like enormous ones. Some people are medium, and some people are small. They don't really. They need to. They only need to eat a little bit to be satisfied. And so here's the case, right? Let's talk about people in terms of their sizes. If you had somebody who weighs like 100 pounds, somebody who weighs like 150 pounds, and somebody who weighs like 250 pounds, so the amount that they can eat is different. The 100-pound person is going to eat so many calories and feel full, and the 150-pound person is going to eat so many calories and more calories, and that will make them full. 250-pound person is probably going to eat twice of, or maybe like all of what they would eat in order to be able to feel full. So their appetite is going to depend on their size. So in other words, let's pick an example. Let's say an administrative tiger. That's the one that gets work done. So, okay, let's just say administrative tiger is like really big. So that big administrative tiger is going to be able to like do an enormous amount of organization, delegation, following up on tasks. Like if you've got a really big tiger, you'll be able to eat a lot. You'll be able to do it all day, and you'll be able to do it all day and all week, and maybe even on the weekends. And you'll be able to digest all of that. Now, somebody who's got a medium-sized tiger, well, they're not going to be able to do it all day and every day, but they might be able to do it for like a few hours a day and like a couple days a week. And then somebody who's got a small tiger, that's administrative, they're really not going to be able to do a lot of it at all. And it's something they might avoid. And if they had to do it a couple times a week for an hour here or there, that would satisfy them. That would fill them up. It's not a judgment. We're not saying good or bad. We're just, it's also not to say the 150 person or the 250-pound person is better than the 150 or the 100 person. They're just of different sizes. And it's objective. Their appetites are of different sizes. And the appetite depends on the amount it eats also. So what I want to say here is it's all relative, right? You can have a small tiger that's really hungry, and you can have a small tiger that's satisfied, and a small tiger that's really full, or person, however. I mean, if we're talking about real food, right? Any one of those people can be hungry or satisfied or full or like stuffed. They can be, even eat too much. So that's an important point to remember as we come to our next point, which is if a tiger eats too much, it gets overfed. That's obvious. Like all of us have overeaten, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or, I don't know, just like any day of the week where you just decide to like eat a lot of food. Tigers can, you can physically eat too much, and tigers can also eat too much too. So let's just say you were that person with the small, let's pick another one. How about logical tiger? Okay, so logical tiger is one that deals with numbers. So if you've got a small logical tiger, it means that you have an appetite only for doing like calculation and number-related things for like a small amount of time. So if you have to do a lot of spreadsheets, and then you have to do some formulas, and you have to do some calculations, and you have to calculate your taxes, and so on and so forth. So you do that for a little while, and you'll feel full. You can get, if you eat too much of it, that little guy, he might do it for 2 hours and then feel like, oh my God, I've had enough. And if someone's got a medium-sized tiger, they might be able to do it for a couple of hours before reaching that point. And if somebody's got a massive logical tiger, well, they could do a lot of calculation over a long period of time. But the important thing is that each one of them can get overfed. And that's also something to think about, because sometimes people misunderstand. They think that because they've got a big tiger in whatever area it might be, like I have a big educative tiger. So I might think that I'm like, super tiger with my educative tiger, that I can take on any amount of teaching whatsoever. But we know that's not the case. In fact, I know somebody who's an educator, and he was really burnt out, and I did counseling with him, and we found out, and he was teaching, and I was thinking, hey, maybe this person doesn't have a big educative tiger and he's teaching. Well, I found out he had a really big educative tiger, but the problem was that he was teaching too much. It was like, early morning. Sometimes he did like some early morning session before school started to help tutor somebody, then school, then after school, then on weekend. This guy was just doing way too much teaching, and he overfed himself. So it's important to note that it's not just small tigers that can get overfed. It's even the big ones that can get overfed too. So keep that in mind and be careful. Take care of those tigers. Here's another one. If a tiger doesn't eat enough, it becomes hungry. Sounds pretty obvious, right? If you don't eat enough, well, you become hungry. I know my wife doesn't eat enough because she like gets angry, and an hungry tiger is an angry tiger, right? And so you need to think about that too, that if you have, let's pick up another one out of the 19 tigers, how about the naturalistic tiger, right? So if you don't, it doesn't matter what size it is. I don't know, let's pick let's go back to small. You have small, let's say, or big. You have a big naturalistic tiger. If you don't get outside like every day and spend time with the trees and sky and clouds and, plants and whatever, or animals, you're going to freak out. So it's going to be hungry, right? It's going to want, if like you're stuck indoors and you've got to do some work and that it's really requiring you to be inside, or the weather's like not that great. Like I think about my stepdad, who's 87 years old, amazing. He goes out for a walk like every day, for as long as I've known him, like rain or shine, it doesn't matter. He's got to go out for his walk at 3 o'clock every day. That's enormous. And if he doesn't, he gets edgy. He can't tolerate. If he misses a day or 2 days, it's like he's really feeling it. So if a tiger doesn't eat enough, it becomes hungry. So we have two states. One is it can eat too much and get overfed, and the other is it can be hungry. Now, what happens next is this. I hope you're digging these fundamentals, right? They're really simple points, but when you got these down, wax on, Daniel-san. Wax off, Daniel-san. When you got these tiger basics down, then we're going to get into the principles. Whammo! You're going to see how all of these things fit together, and it just makes like sparks. It makes like fireworks. Well, at least for me, it does. I hope you're getting that and you feel that too. Otherwise, there's somebody over 2 channels over with some left hemisphere psychometric model that's really antiseptic. All right, but here we are talking tigers, and this is fun stuff. And this is why, because overfed tigers lead to stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and burnout, right? You know that. Let's pick up another one. I have to scan through my tiger list. I see the MIs on one side, I see the MNs on the other side, and we're going to pick up the intrapersonal tiger, right? So intrapersonal is, intrapersonal is like, deep thinking, analytical, self-reflection, right? So if you got a big tiger there, it doesn't matter what size it is, but you like to think about life and philosophy and spirituality, etc. You can overdo that stuff, Like you can really be in your head and get like way deep into it to the point where like you're thinking about your thinking and you're like thinking about how you're overthinking your thinking, and you get so deep into that you start to burn your brain out. And that really leads to exhaustion. Let's just say that you're a therapist and you're working with a lot of patients, and then maybe you're dealing with your own problems. So it's like lots of psychological, like a lot of that intrapersonal tiger, it's just being used and overused. And what happens when you overuse it, you start to get stressed out, right? You start to get anxious, you start to get burnout. And that could be like that with anything. It could be with your body, use it too much, right? It could be your hands or your fingers, your dexterity. If you're like working with your hands all the time, you're going to start getting pain and repetitive stress injury and those sort of things. So that's what happens when you overfeed your tigers. You got to be careful not to do that, because that's what happens down that path when you overdo it. Here we go. Push the button. Hungry tigers lead to frustration and a feeling of lack of fulfillment. Love the hungry tigers. Love the hungry tigers. Leads to to frustration and a feeling of lack of fulfillment, right? So if you've got that creative, let's bring out the creative tiger now, rawr, right? The creative tiger, you might have a big one, just loves to come up with new ideas, and it could be like drawing things or painting things or like creating musical stuff or writing creatively or, doing flower arrangements or something like that, right? So you got this creative tiger, and it just needs to eat. But your job is like, you have a job that might be very repetitive, where there's no room for creativity. You might be doing quality control, and you've got to inspect and see that everything's following a particular set of rules, and there's processes, and you want to check to ensure that people know the processes and they're following it. And meanwhile, that creative tiger is just not eating. And you're dying from inside, right? It's like eating away at you. It's frustrating you, and it's making you feel like, I just got to get out of this. I have to do something with this. And often people don't know what it is, and that's why I said at the beginning it's important to know what those 19 traits are, so we can understand that which element is it too salty? Is there too much flour that's in there? Not enough water? Where's the imbalance? Where's the imbalance happening? And so here we can see sometimes then when there's a lack, when we're not getting enough, that's when that sort of feeling of, you just want to like go do something. And often it leads to like eating chocolate or, caffeine, or you're frustrated, you have to smoke a cigarette, or you got to go vape, or you need some kind of little pills to stimulate you and get you going. So that's what happens when you got hungry tigers. They eat you from the inside out. And so you've got to watch that. Okay, let's come back to the slides. We're almost there. I told you 15. How do you like that? We're almost there. When someone has significantly underfed or overfed tigers, they're misaligned. Well, that's what it means, right? So whether it's overfed or whether it's underfed, we'll say that your tigers are misaligned. The idea of what I speak about with multiple natures, like our theme is aligning potential. Our slogan, multiple natures, aligning potential. Spent a lot of time to figure that out. Aligning potential. And that's what this is about. Your potential is your nature. Your nature is made up of lots of those little tigers. And the idea is to get those tigers aligned with the type of work that you do. So whether they're big or whether they're small, they're eating the right amount. And so, right, when you're not doing that, they're overfed too much or they're underfed, you're misaligned. You're misaligned. And so that's the important point here. All right, keep going. When someone has appropriately fed tigers that are not significantly overfed or underfed, they're considered aligned. They are in alignment. And that's what we're looking for, aligning your potential. When people say, I'm looking for harmony, I'm looking for balance, like what do they mean by that? These words get bandied about. People talk about, unlock your potential, fulfill your potential. Lots of courses that will talk about that. But what does it really mean? When we talk about that, let's be a little bit more specific and a little bit more precise. Here, when we're talking potential, potential is ultimately the size of your tigers. That's what it means here in this case. So I'm really specific about that. We know what the tigers are. We know what big, medium, and small is. And that's the potential that you have to work with. If you've got a big entrepreneurial tiger, right, you have a lot of potential to become an entrepreneur and to do business, etc. That's what a big entrepreneurial tiger means. And so you could live into that, and it's easy for you to align that potential and to expand that potential and to succeed with that potential if you know what it is and you align it correctly, right? If you've got a small one, right, and then you try to open up a business and everything, well, you got a small tiger which is trying to, eat an enormous, it's like trying to eat an elephant. And ain't gonna happen. And so it's gonna like be eating it and eating it and eating it. It's gonna overeat and it's gonna get misaligned, right? So in other words, if you have work that is beyond your potential and you try to undertake that, well, that's gonna lead to being that'll be misaligned, you'll be overfed, or vice versa. If you've got some qualities, you have some huge, enormous musical intelligence, and it's just like sitting inside you, it's going to eat away at you, right? Eat you from the inside out, and you're also misaligned. And so that's what we're talking about here, which is that when someone has appropriately fed tigers that are not significantly overfed or underfed, they're considered aligned, right? So we understand when they are connected to what you're doing, when they're not connected to what you're doing, that's what that means, aligned and misaligned. Okay, almost there. When someone is misaligned, it can create problems in their life, such as leading them to become physically or mentally ill. It can also be the cause of conflict in relationships. And so that's really obvious, right? You've got a small administrative tiger and you have to manage people, and your interpersonal is small, and your administrative is small, and you're a manager of like a big team of people. Well, guess what? Your administrative and interpersonal tigers are going to get overfed, and you're going to get misaligned. And where does that lead? That leads to burnout, that leads to stress, that leads to anxiety, and that leads right to some therapist chair or some support group someplace. Or you're, having problems with people at the office, right? When I know this happens to me, when I'm misaligned, like my administrative is not the biggest, my logical is also not the biggest. And when I have a lot of like administrative stuff that deals with a lot of numbers, and I have to do that intensely for periods of time, I get very snappy. If one of my daughters comes in, or if somebody's asking me for something, like my patience level just drops. And so it really impacts my relationship with those people. If it's once in a while, that's one thing. But if it's like day in and day out, for weeks or months at a time, then that's really going to mess things up in a relationship. And I'm not saying that this is the only reason why relationship problems happen. There can be many other reasons why they happen as well. But what I mean to say is, specifically with respect to people and their engagement in work and activities, that's the scope that I'm talking about when I talk about multiple natures and intelligencies. When I talk about nature and I talk about the particular area, or I'm defining the scope of what intelligencies and natures cover, it's how you act in social environments, especially when there is work to be done and there are other people there, and it could be a job, or it could be community work, or it could be social service, or some kind of volunteer group, or some club or something. Anytime there's work and activities that need to be done, this is where those natures and intelligencies come into play. So this is the sphere, this is the scope. So when they are, let's come back to it. Someone is misaligned to create problems in their life, such as leading them to become physically or mentally ill, and can be the cause of conflict in relationships. Okay. A satisfied tiger is one that is neither overfed nor underfed. It is fed the appropriate amount of activity. Okay? So when people talk about balance and harmony, that's what it means, right? The tigers are all fed. My musical gets enough, my creative gets enough, my logical gets enough, my administrative gets enough, my entrepreneurial gets enough, my naturalistic. So, a lot of tigers to feed. In most cases, you don't have to worry about this feeding the smaller ones and even the medium ones to that. The ones that you do need to focus on first are the bigger ones, because their appetite is bigger, and then you need to be fed more. At the same time, you do need to know which are the smaller ones, especially in terms of overfeeding, that you don't want to overfeed those smaller ones. And so in most cases, it's not that you have to focus on all 19 at the same time, but you typically need to know which are the bigger ones that you need to feed and which are the smaller ones that you need to ensure that they don't get overfed. That's the approach that you need to take. Okay, so again, we're almost there. This is the last slide we're coming to in just a minute. So a satisfied tiger is one that is neither overfed nor underfed. It's fed the appropriate amount of activity. Okay, so we want to get each of them satisfied. And now here we come to the last slide, get ready. The state of swastha exists when a person's tigers are consistently satisfied over an extended period of time. State of swastha, I'm going to explain what that means in just a second, exists when a person's tigers are consistently satisfied over an extended period of time. So the word swastha, swa means self, sta means aligned with or situated in. So when you're aligned with yourself, right? When I'm aligned with myself, when I'm situated within myself, that's swastha. So swastha means when all of your tigers are fed the appropriate amount. So my creative gets enough, and my musical gets enough, and my visual gets enough, and my administrative gets enough, and my interpersonal gets enough, and my educative gets enough. It's a big one for me. So when each of them gets enough, and the other one's not too much, the smaller ones, then I'm centered in myself. I'm centered in myself. Swastha. Now the cool thing, as you might recall if you've seen some of my other videos, swastha, situated in yourself. When you are swastha, in alignment, the word swastha means well-being or enduring well-being or health. It's very interesting. According to the ancients, health, the original concept of health, is not your body mass index, your cholesterol level, your weight, or blood pressure. That's not what health means. That's how we tend to gauge it in the West. But in the East, they would gauge health by how situated you are in yourself, how connected you are with what it is that you're doing, how much each of your tigers is getting fed. So when you're feeding your tigers the right amount, you're automatically in this state of alignment in swastha. You are healthy, and it flows from there. Then your blood pressure will be the right amount. Your stress levels won't be, you'll have less cortisol in your body. That's what being healthy means. That's what well-being means. And so, this was the last one, right? State of swastha. And when it's consistent over an extended period of time. So I'm not talking about flow. You'll hear this word flow, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. You might know the name. Impossible to spell. And that's probably why he wasn't more famous. His flow theory was really famous because flow is easy to spell, right? And flow, right? So a lot of people know the flow theory. So people talk about to be in a state of flow. Flow is more of a momentary kind of thing, like when you're in a state of flow, like you're drawing something and suddenly you're lost within that, or you're playing some music and you're just or you're cooking something and you're just in that state. You're playing basketball and like everything's just, time slows down. You lose your sense of time or feeling of like hunger or pain, all that stuff disappears because you're in a state of flow. That's usually something very momentary. It could be for like seconds or minutes. I mean, it might be really rare that somebody's in a state of flow for hours, but you're usually not in a consistent state of flow for like days or weeks on end. So flow is that intense, it's like an intense version of alignment. It's like alignment in a very intense kind of way. But when you're not in that sort of intense version of alignment, but you're still more or less, your tigers are kind of being fed the right amount, that's what swastha is. And that can be gauged over a period of, days or weeks or months. So like the last couple of days or weeks or months, like, I'm feeling pretty good. Like I'm doing good these days. These days is the way to measure it. There's no exact time, but it's like these days, where you can say like, I've really been out of it. I've been putting on weight the last couple, of weeks or something. I'm not myself. That means you're misaligned during that time. And it's not a black and white. It's to degrees, and there are ways that we can measure it. I've actually developed this method with some very bright folks. Who are psychometricians, how we can actually measure the level of your alignment or misalignment. We'll talk about that in another. It's worth having an episode all about that. Now that I think about it, we're going to do that. So that's where we need to go. We're looking to achieve a state of alignment, a state of swastha. We talked about all these principles. I don't have them all on one slide, and I don't want to like kind of go back through all of them. There are a lot. I'll make sure that the slideshow will be there in the notes, so you'll be able to go through. My flies down again. My ear thing's popping out. So, I hope you dug these basics, this primer on the tigers, understanding. Well, heck, I can just kind of like rattle through them super quickly, right? That you have a nature. It's made up of 19 traits. Your MIs and MNs are like tigers. Tigers eat activities. Tigers can be of different sizes. Tiger's appetite depends on its size and the amount it eats. If a tiger eats too much, it gets overfed. If a tiger doesn't eat enough, it becomes hungry. Overfed tigers lead to stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and burnout. Hungry tigers lead to frustration and a feeling of lack of fulfillment. When someone is significantly underfed or overfed tigers, they are misaligned, yes. When someone has appropriately fed tigers that are not significantly overfed or underfed, they are considered aligned. When someone is misaligned, it can create problems in their life, such as leading them to become physically ill or mentally ill. It can also be the cause of conflict in relationships, yes. A satisfied tiger is one that is neither overfed nor underfed. It is fed the appropriate amount of activity. And last was swastha, that state that exists when a person's tigers are consistently satisfied over an extended period of time. So now you've got the basics. Good job, Daniel-san. You waxed on, you waxed off. If you've made it this far, boy, oh boy, when those punches come, you're just going to be your tigers, you're going to be ready. You're actually going to be ready to learn like the next level of moves, you know, those kind of like crouching dragon, hidden tiger sort of moves. You're going to learn how to understand and get down with these tigers, and that's going to be the next session that I'm going to do, my next live. We'll get into the 7 principles. So I've cleared the ground. You are ready to receive them now, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of Multiple Natures Live, and let's kick it out with a little bit of ending music. Every week I'm here, I'm Stephen Rudolph, and I talk about how you can align your potential with what it is that you do so you can thrive. And if you'd like to know more about your own tigers, there's a way that you can do it. You can take the MN test. There's a link over here if you would like to check that out. And in case you're a guidance professional and you'd like to use multiple natures with the people that you work with, here's a way that you can do so through our practitioner course. I've also got a course which is a brand new one that's coming out, which is Navigate Your Nature, that uses ChatGPT. It uses artificial intelligence and multiple natures together. If you'd like to know more about that, check it out. We've got a couple seats remaining for our maiden voyage, and I would love if you would be on that journey with me, so together we can find out what your tigers are and how you can get them aligned and you can thrive in your life. And don't forget to subscribe, do all that kind of good stuff. Don't click on that guy's one over there. Click on this one here. If you like this video today, click on it. Leave me some messages. Tell me what you've learned and tell me how your tigers are doing. I'd love to hear from you. And with that, I will see you at another time in another dimension, and we'll be talking more about the tigers. And with that, I'll say thank you. We'll catch you soon. And how about let's roll those ending credits. How does that go, man? I think it goes like this.